Hi. If, like me, you're super busy with the usual maintenance jobs around the pond and fending off tiny aliens trying to steal your fish, you could do a lot worse than taking a break, taking some time out and watching the latest episode of The Ginger Pond Keeper. Run the intro.
Hello, my name's Andy. I'm the Ginger Pond Keeper. Welcome to episode 111. This episode is going to be about my DIY moving bed, how I made it, why I took the decisions I did, and how well it works. I made it back in 2022, but due to taking a little bit of a break from making frequent, regular videos at that time, I only really mentioned it briefly during a summer update video, and I feel it deserves having more time given to it. Hopefully, it might also be useful for someone else looking into their own DIY filter options. Before I talk about it specifically, I'm going to start with some basics, just to get everyone on the same page. So a moving bed is a type of biological filter. So a moving bed is a type of biological filter, meaning that its role within the overall filtration is to cultivate a colony of bacteria that can help convert the harmful ammonia produced by the fish to nitrite, and subsequently to the less harmful nitrate, and by doing so help support a healthy environment for the fish. Obviously, this is a very simplistic explanation. If you'd like some further reading, then one of many good sources will be appearing on screen now. So, one of the first considerations when making a biological filter is to provide a way of supplying the bacteria somewhere to colonise and live on. To do this efficiently, both in terms of making it accessible to the water moving through your system, and not making the filter unduly large, while also allowing space for the vast quantities of bacteria that are needed to deal with the volume of waste produced by pondfish, especially carp, most biological filters use a media within it that have a large surface area. There's lots of different types, but the ones I use are K1 Micro and K+, which are small, intricate pieces of plastic, each of which have a considerable surface area within their structure for the microscopic bacteria to live on. The next consideration is the container that is used to house the media and will allow the water to flow through and around it. Mostly this can be any sort of container, with inlets and outlets for the water to enter and exit through, and a means of ensuring the media doesn't leave with the water. Professionally built ones are in a range of shapes and sizes, although mainly rectangular or cylindrical. The most important consideration, whether your system is a pump-fed or gravity-fed system, is ensuring its size and height is in keeping with your other filtration, something I'll talk more about later on. Another consideration is the flow of water out of the filter. This is especially important in a pump-fed gravity return system, where you have to ensure that water can flow easily out of the system, but also ensure that the media can't escape. There's many ways to achieve this that shop-bought systems use, and many ways that DIYers use too, with a variety of meshes and cages employed. Again, I'll talk more about this in a bit. Right, I'll next move on to discussions about moving and static biological filters. As I discussed in my 3-video filtration series, moving bed filters involve the agitation of the media, usually with aeration, which causes the media to both move around the filter and bang and knock into each other, resulting in a colony of bacteria on the media that is robust and healthy, which further results in more efficient and effective ammonia and nitrite reduction. There's been quite a few academic and scientific studies that support this, so moving beds appear to be the sensible route to go down. Before, finally, getting to my current moving bed, I'll talk about the first DIY one I made and the issues I had with it. If you've been aware of my channel for a few years, you may have seen the series of videos detailing its build or the complete one video version, but I'll still just give you a quick recap as I both guess and really hope you've forgotten all about it. Version 1 was just a relatively small rectangular container through which water flowed from the multi-bay, through the media and out through an outlet and then through some more pipe work to the pond. The media was agitated by an air disc. So far, so typical. But there are a number of problems. Firstly, I could only fit about 40 litres of media in it. Next, I had a real problem enabling enough flow through the system while also preventing media from either escaping or blocking the outlet. Next, the relatively shallow depth compared to the length and width of the container meant that avoiding dead spots where the media remained static was really difficult, and for related reasons, preventing dirt from collecting at the bottom of the container. What it did succeed in, however, was teaching me some really useful lessons that I would employ in my design for version 2. One, I needed a larger capacity container to allow more media and consequently greater biological filtration. 2. However, the new container should preferably be taller to help with aeration and movement, as well as to accommodate the lack of space in the filter shed. 3. The new version would need to be height balanced with the existing filters to prevent overflowing, etc. 4. I needed to find a way to allow easy cleaning and draining of the filter to prevent a potentially unhealthy build-up of dirt. 5. I needed to find a solution to the flow versus media retention quandary. And 6. Finally, I needed to do all of that within a restricted budget. So, first things first, I needed to choose the perfect container for the filter. I'd seen many pond keepers use wheelie bins, and most recently to me, before planning my new filter, I'd been watching the Koi Connection where Lowe was using one, also following after a multi-bay as mine would be. It ticked all the boxes I needed: tall, large capacity, strong and robust, safe plastic and able to be drilled and glued with the usual stuff. But the potential stumbling block might have been price. However, I didn't need to worry, as a 240 litre wheelie bin, including delivery, was only £55, so entirely reasonable. Even with the additional capacity, the wheelie bin still had a smaller footprint than version 1, which helped with my space issues in the filter shed. To address balancing the height of the filters, I would use some blocks to raise the multi-bay up so that its outlet and water level would match the height of the outlet and water level in the wheelie bin. To address cleaning, I decided on a 1.5 inch bulkhead towards the bottom of the bin, adding a 90-degree fitting inside it so that when draining the filter it would be drawing water and hopefully any waste from the very bottom. I would use a gate valve and, once in the shed, would connect this to the drainage pipework which would send water to my sump. Finally, possibly the trickiest problem to solve, ensuring the flow rate and containing the media. The first would be achieved by using 2-inch pipework from the multi-bay to the moving bed and 2-inch pipework from the moving bed to the pond. This was important as to enable the equivalent gravity return flow rate as the pump-fed flow rate, it's important to have wider pipework. The pipes from the pump are all 1.5 inch, so at least 2-inch returns would be needed. The next was trickier. However, I'd learnt from version 1 that only having a small surface area where water could leave the filter meant that the media would be forced against the grid or mesh on the outlet, effectively blocking it, causing a reduction in flow rate and a resultant overflow. So, the logical solution was in having a greater surface area through which the water could flow out, reducing the pressure at the point media would be prevented from following and thereby stopping any blockage. My solution would be to use a length of 2-inch pipe within the bin, approximately the length of it. I would then need to cut sections of this pipe away so that the remaining pipe was just enough to retain its shape and provide a framework for the mesh I would attach to it to block the media. With those solutions decided on, I then set to building the filter and installing it to the overall system. The first job was to install the 3 bulkheads I would need, 2 of 2-inch for the inlet and outlet, and a 1.5-inch one for the drainage. For these I used hole saws to create the holes, and then some sanding paper to smooth any rough edges remaining from the drilling. I next roughed up the size of the wheelie bin around each hole to help when installing the bulkheads and adding sealant. With each bulkhead fitted, I added some pipework to allow me to fill the bin with water and test for leaks. I left the filled bin overnight and only found one the next day, a very small one from one of the 2-inch bulkheads, so added some more sealant and retested. Something I repeated a number of times, but in the end I gave up all pretense of a neat finish and just slapped CT1 on, and that did the trick. The problem was that once in position in the shed, it would be next to impossible to attend to it, even though it was the kind of infrequently dripping leak that often resolve themselves. Anyway, that solved, it was time to turn to actually constructing the outlet pipework. Cutting the 2-inch pipe into a framework with lots of surface area to allow water to flow out of the filter was fairly easy. Doing it neatly, for me anyway, not so much. However, once I attached the mesh, which is actually a mesh designed to protect saplings and as such keeps a nice round shape by itself, it looked a fair bit better. And then once attached in place, looked pretty damn good to my admittedly biased eyes. Next, I added the internal drainage fittings, which were 2 rubber 90 degrees designed to keep it both positioned as low as possible to the bottom of the bin, but also away from the next job, the air disc. I made a little stand out of a media grid to keep the air disc flat above the slightly raised bump on the bottom of the bin. As the airline I would be using to feed the disc would be rigid speed fit, there would be no issues with the grid floating up. I thought about making a small hole in the side of the bin for the air pipework, but with a gap around the lid, there was no point. The next challenge in construction was adding the pipework that would take water from the multi-bay to the moving bed and then from the moving bed back to the pond. Not particularly challenging as such, but due to the limited room in the shed, a lot of the work would need to be done before both filters were actually moved into it. Therefore, I positioned the 2 filters in the garden at the height and spacing they would later be in the shed. I could then cut and attach the pipework as needed. I would then leave the pipework attached to the lower fittings, e.g. the bottom of the moving bed and the return to the pond fittings in the shed. This meant that when the filters were moved to their permanent position, I would only have to attach the 2 upper fittings, the outlet on the multi-bay and the outlet on the moving bed, which would still be reachable, unlike the lower ones. My DIY moving bed has been in place now for 2 years. I started by just adding the 40 litres of media that I had in version 1, but over the first year I increased that to about 100 litres. I did this by adding new media to the static beds in the multi-bay first, letting it mature in there and then transferring it into the moving bed, and then repeating this until I'd added all the new media. I could potentially add some more, I think, and may do so if needed. For example, if the water quality starts to deteriorate. So, how well has it worked? Firstly, on a practical note, there's been no leaks, which is a good thing, as dealing with any leaks would be tricky, and the major problem I had to solve, the flow versus media retention quandary, which I made the DIY outlet for, has been a big success. Flow rates have been perfect, no overflowing, and no media has escaped. On a functional level, the filter has performed great, in spite of me feeding increased amounts. My ammonia and nitrite levels have been better than ever, which is ultimately the most important thing. The final aspect to judge it by is cleanliness. Have the measures I've employed prevented dirt from building up, and does the drainage help with cleaning any that does? Well, yes, Basically, little or no dirt collects anywhere in the filter. I occasionally drain it, but the water is pretty much clean. I've used the pond vac in the filter and it's not collected anything, and I've taken a look with the GoPro and it's revealed nothing either. And that's how a properly constructed moving bed should work, as the dirt reaching it from your mechanical filtration should both be minimal and only smaller items, and the movement provided by the aeration should prevent any dirt that does enter it from settling, enabling the bed to be basically self-cleaning. The dirt build-up in version 1 was a pretty good indication that it was fairly poorly constructed, and in solving it in version 2 is also a good indication that I've got it right this time. Right, so that's my DIY moving bed. If you've any suggestions or questions, please feel free to add them in the comment section. Thanks a lot for watching, I really appreciate it. If you've liked this episode, please add a like, please share, and if you're not subscribed, please consider doing that too. Because, as you may know, I'm counting down to 1,000 subs, and as of today, I'm at 127 to go. Anyway, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.